Hi, I'm Heather from Heather Handmade, and today I'm going to teach you how to make a nice, cozy Minky blanket. Both sides are Minky, which makes the Minky easier to sew with. This is an easy sewing project. It's great for beginners, and it makes a really great handmade gift. In the wintertime, I get cold really easy. It's like I'm a lizard, and if I don't have sunshine, I'm always cold. So I need lots of blankets. I chose to do a Minky blanket because it's warm, it's really soft and comfortable, and if you are using a Minky fabric with the Minky fabric, you know, one for the front and one for the back, it's a lot easier to sew it that way than adding a woven to a Minky, because Minky is a stretch fabric and it makes it hard to add to a woven fabric like satin or flannel or something like that. I ordered my fabrics online, and as you can see, the blues don't actually match that well, but I'm gonna sew them together anyway, and I'm hoping since one is the front and one is the back, it won't be that noticeable. I chose a solid and this kind of indigo dyed look. I think it looks a little more grown up and sophisticated because this will become a throw blanket for my couch, and I didn't want it to look that much like a baby blanket. I will share a link for both of these fabrics in the description below, so if you would like to buy it, then you can go find it yourself. I chose to buy 2 yards of each. That is bigger than a throw blanket. A throw blanket is usually the width of a fabric plus 1.5 yards, but I always think that blankets are not big enough, and I want it to be really big and snuggly, and I'm okay with it being bigger as for my throw blanket. So I did 2 yards of each color. So I'm going to be using just a universal thread, and then I have a jersey needle in my sewing machine. It's a size 90-14, and this is because Minky is a knit fabric and you don't want to have a sharp needle that tears through the fabric. You want to have a rounder tip that kind of pushes the fibers aside. I'm also going to be using clips to keep my fabric edges together. When I have something that is this big, I find that using pins, they're easily, when I have something so big, the pins can easily get caught on something and, you know, be pulled out, and I often lose pins when I have something this big like a blanket. So I like using clips because they don't come off, they don't go anywhere, and it still keeps my fabric together. You can see that this one has a white edge. I'm not going to cut that off. I'm just going to plan on sewing a really deep seam allowance so I don't have to trim that off. But with right sides together, and I'm matching, this is my selvage and this is my cut edge. I'm going to match, if I can find the right corner, I'm matching the selvage edges together and then my cut edges this way together. And I'm going to clip it all the way around. It's going to take me a long time. The interesting thing about Minky fabric is that it is a knit fabric, but it is more of a stable knit fabric where it stretches on the horizontal, which is the cross grain, and it doesn't really stretch on the grain line, vertically. And this is how you define a stable knit. So that means when I'm sewing the selvage edges, I won't have to worry about it stretching. So I'm putting my clips pretty far apart, just, to keep it together. But on my cross grain, I will want to clip closer together because that is where it can stretch and I want it to stay together. So I have clipped 2 sides of my blanket together, and as you can see right here, there is about 1.5 inches difference. So I'm going to need to cut that much off of my blue one. And then if you look down here, there is about a 4-inch difference between my, my top fabric and my bottom fabric. This could be any number of things. It could be the way that it shrinks. It could be that it was cut a little wrong. Who knows? And it's fine. I'm just going to trim the part that is too wide. So I'm going to measure. So this is 1 inch and 5/8 difference. So that's what I'm going to cut off of this whole edge. So I have my ruler. Now I'm going to sew the blanket together. Everything has been clipped, and I am going to use a 5/8 seam allowance because I want to have a lot of room for the seam allowance to stay in the blanket and keep it strong. You also need to leave, like 6 to 8 inches of a hole, and you backstitch on each side so that you have room to turn the blanket right side out. I recommend having the hole be on the selvage side because that side does not stretch, and that will make it so your hole won't stretch as you're pulling it out. So now I'm going to take my scissors. You can see this is my hole where I'm going to turn it right side out, but before I do that, you want to trim your corners, and this is to reduce the bulk in your corners so you have a nice point at your corner instead of a corner that is bulky and kind of round because there's so much seam allowance and fabric in there. Now, after trimming the corners, I am going to turn the blanket right side out through this hole, and I find the best way to do that is to put my hand in till I find like an opposite corner and pull that. Just start pulling it through. And I'm not trying to stretch my hole. I'm trying to be really careful about just pulling what can easily come through. The great thing about Minky is it is slippery, so a lot of it can go through easily, but I'm not trying to, force it through the hole. It's turned right side out. I'm going to take my point turner and put my hand deep into the blanket and poke out those corners. I'm going to close this hole by top stitching or edge stitching the edge. I want it as close as to the edge as possible, and I can do this with Minky because Minky is really fuzzy, so the stitches hide a little bit better, and I don't want to hand sew, so if you don't want any of your stitches to show, you can do, you can hand stitch it. You can clip it in place before you sew if that makes you feel more comfortable. And now my hole is closed and it can't be opened, and it's almost invisible. The last thing I'm going to do is, I don't want to quilt the blanket and I don't want to do like a giant X. What I'm going to do, which I see a lot on blankets that you buy from the store that are Minky, is I'm going to sew like I'm going to sew, a couple of inches in from the edge all the way around, just kind of a smaller rectangle, and that way it will keep all of the edges together. It kind of keeps the blanket together in the middle, but you don't have to quilt the whole thing. I can't press this edge. Minky will melt if you iron it. So you're just going to have to roll the edge with your finger the best you can. Luckily with Minky, it can be pretty relaxed and it's okay. It still looks really great. I'm going to sew, this is how deep I want it to be, my stitch from the edge, and then I have this nice guideline to follow, but this is, you know, this is really deep. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put in my walking foot because I'm working with 2 slippery layers of fabric, and a walking foot helps keep everything from sliding and moving.